walk into your leadership meeting. Everyone's there. The conversation flows. Nobody's fighting. People are nodding and nothing is getting done. It looks coordinated. It feels coordinated, but here's what's actually happening underneath the surface. It's like a duck above the water. Everything looks fine above the water, but below the surface, his feet are just flailing. You think you have a performance problem, but you don't. You have a coordination problem, and that's way worse because you can't train your way out of a coordination problem. Hi, I'm Mitchell Simon. I've spent over 20 years rebuilding executive teams at companies like Sony PlayStation, CDC Small Business Finance, Cushman & Wakefield, and QSC Audio. The pattern I see over and over, CEOs bringing in coaches, running leadership training, hiring and firing, trying to fix what they think is a performance problem. Meanwhile, the actual problem never gets touched. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what an uncoordinated team looks like, why it happens, what actually fixes it, and what becomes possible when you get there. An uncoordinated team doesn't look chaotic, it looks smooth, professional, buttoned up. That's the trap. Here's what I see when I walk into an uncoordinated team. Meetings start when everybody gets there, but never on time. And nobody says anything about it. It's like they're running a really great baseball game, but nobody ever scores. There's no real agenda, either no conflict at all, everything is polite, or really bad personal conflict. A coordinated team talks about what isn't working without judgment. We said X was going to happen before Y, but it's not flowing. No blame, just coordination. An uncoordinated team either avoids the conversation entirely or makes it personal. People speak one after another, but nobody checks back to what the last person said. No priorities, everything gets equal time, and nobody holds each other accountable. It looks nice on the outside, but there's nothing interesting happening because nobody's saying, hey, you made these promises and you haven't fulfilled them. And underneath it all, no overriding inspirational vision. No place they're all going that they've completely bought into. Now, when a team is bought into something moving and inspiring, everyone coordinates around that vision naturally. When there's no vision, everyone defaults to defending their own department. Here's a diagnostic that tells me immediately what I'm dealing with. I do 360s, one-on-one 360s. When every direct report says their leader is amazing, but peer feedback says this colleague is not so amazing, that's a coordination problem, not a people problem. The vertical relationships are strong, top to bottom, but the horizontal ones are broken. When CEOs see dysfunction, the first move is always the same. Bring in coaches to train leaders one-on-one. It builds individual strength. It doesn't fix the coordination problem. Here's what I walk into most of the time. The CEO is taking on accountability for everything. All the decisions, all the meetings, the culture, making sure the executive team stays on track. They're running everything. And from the outside, it looks like strong leadership. What they're actually creating is wonderful islands of accountability. Every executive is focused on their own department, reporting up to the CEO, doing good work in their lane. But there's no country that cares for all the islands. Nobody's calling out anybody else because they're not committed to something bigger than their departments. That accountability, the horizontal kind, never gets built. And here's what the CEO doesn't see. Their primary focus isn't to make sure everyone reports to them effectively. Their primary focus is to build a team that holds itself accountable to each other. So the CEO can go raise money, influence the board, spend time with people across the company, and build the future. CEO entrapment is thinking your job is to run strategy, run meetings, run agendas, when in fact, your primary role is to create a team that is accountable to itself. This becomes a genuine crisis at a specific moment when the company hits around 50 to 100 employees. Up until that point, the leaders are the culture. They're doing the work, carrying the strategy, making things happen, and it works. But once you get past that number, 50 to 100, everything has to change. The culture can't sit at the executive level anymore. It needs to be carried by people 2 and 3 levels down. Strategy can't be owned by the people at the top. It needs to be executed below them. And the executive team needs to learn how to cascade communication all the way down the organization so that the organization understands the vision and the strategy. What that really means is that the executives have to stop being leaders of their own departments and start being leaders of the vision. Strategic creators who distribute the work down and get out of the way. When that shift doesn't happen, the company looks functional on paper, every department running well, everyone reporting up to the CEO, while the real job, holding each other accountable for the overall vision, never gets done. If this is landing and you're ready to move your team from uncoordinated to coordinated, I work with CEOs of growing companies to build that infrastructure through strategic retreat facilitation. If you want to understand what that looks like for your team, the link is in the description, simonleadershipalliance.com. Most CEOs think that the fix is better communication or clear expectations. It's not. You need infrastructure, and it starts with a shift most executives have never been asked to make. Here's the shift that changes everything. Most executives are hired for accountability to their department. The chief marketing officer is accountable for marketing. The CFO is accountable for finance. That's the job they signed up for, and that's the job they've always done. But a truly coordinated team requires something different. It requires every executive to take on responsibility, not just for their own department, but for the success of the entire leadership team. Their job isn't just to run marketing or finance. Their job is to hold every other person on the team accountable for the vision. Now that's a massive lift, and it takes months for people to genuinely understand that this is now their job. The second thing that has to exist is real team agreements. I mean real team agreements, not values on a wall. Actual explicit agreements about how this team is going to hold each other accountable, how they're going to engage in conflict, how they're going to repair breakdowns when they occur. A coordinated team doesn't just have these agreements, they talk regularly about how well they're living up to these agreements. They celebrate when they engage in real conflict. They celebrate when someone breaks a promise and then reformats it. The agreement itself becomes something the team cares for. And when someone violates an agreement, including the CEO, someone in the room steps up and names it. Not to blame, but to own it. They say something like, "Hey team, we agreed to have cordial and respectful conflict, but we're not doing that right now. And there must be something I'm doing such that it isn't occurring." Now that kind of ownership in the room is what peer accountability actually looks like. The reason why this is so hard to build is that it requires trust at a level most executive teams have never developed. For marketing to call out finance and say you're not keeping your promises, there has to be genuine trust in that room for the calling out to land and for the other person in finance to receive it without getting defensive. Now you can't train that into people. It's a mindset shift. It's a practice. They go from I'm responsible for myself to I'm responsible for my department to I'm responsible for the overall success of this company. And that shift takes months of real work, real conversations, and real vulnerability. Most growing companies eventually implement some kind of operating system, EOS, scaling up, OKRs, now good systems. And companies running them still have massive coordination problems. Here's why. EOS is a great system. I want to be clear about that. But there's a difference between EOS and what I call the religion of ownership. There's a huge transformation mentally and physically, and okay, we'll say spiritually, that as a human executive realize, understand, and accept that his or her role is to take ownership for the success of the company. People are not bought into the fact that at the executive level, their job is to make sure the company executes, not just their department. The layer on top of any operating system is what I'd call the religion of understanding that my job is to take ownership for the results of the company, not just my own area. EOS as a platform only, as a routine, as a check the box, just never works. EOS without that religion is just another thing to do that mostly won't get done. EOS, or scaling up as a religion, has individuals commit to the company's success, which requires holding people accountable for projects that run outside their departments. It requires owning the entire enterprise, but most of all, it means taking a stand for something larger than yourself. larger than what you know, larger than what you can handle and tackle yourself. It requires joint success. It requires joint failure. It requires joint accountability. But most of all, it requires building trust across your team for everyone to be comfortable to be confronted for their actions for the enterprise's success and failure. This requires a transformation of who you think you are as a contributor and who you think you are as a partner in holding yourself and others accountable for the dream. We instituted a full operating system for a software company that developed products for the Navy. We brought in the tools. We shared the tools. The reason it didn't work is because the CEO didn't create trust amongst the team that they could speak freely. Now, unless the CEO can say, I'm not taking responsibility for how I'm showing up, for owning the future of this company, for giving you the ability to trust me, no system will ever work. EOS or scaling up or anything else. The system becomes the structure for a team that still doesn't trust each other. I was working with CDC Small Business Finance. When I came in, the team was there, but they weren't really a team yet. The company had been flat in revenue year after year. We built a language for responsibility versus accountability. It took 3 years, but at the end of those 3 years, there was this one woman, Kat. She stood up and said, look team, I'm responsible. I didn't keep my promise. This is how I feel, and I'm apologizing. And one by one, the rest of the team said the same thing. No, Kat, I'm responsible. This is how I'm responsible for this team not flourishing. And when I saw that each team member took full responsibility for the end result of the team as a whole, I realized I didn't need to be there anymore. CEO Kurt didn't have to babysit, didn't have to run the agendas, didn't have to hold anybody accountable. The team was doing it for themselves. To get there, each person has to become someone that they're not yet. And you can't do that inside your normal work environment. The moment people walk back to the office, they default to exactly who they've always been. That's why committing time to developing team members that are vulnerable, transparent, and committed to building trust, it's just not optional. Your team is not underperforming, they're uncoordinated. And that distinction matters because coordination is fixable. You can build the infrastructure, you can do the work, but it takes months, not days. It takes vulnerability, not training. And it takes a CEO willing to stop being the node everything flows through and start building a team that holds itself accountable. When that happens, anything becomes possible. If this video challenged how you're thinking about your leadership team, there's one more I want you to watch. It's called the $650 million leadership lesson most CEOs never learn. It's the story behind everything I've just showed you and why the CEOs who scale don't have smarter people. They have team members who demonstrate coordination and bring forward the courage to build the impossible. I'll link it right here. Go watch it. I'll see you there.